I'd like to start before we get into the physics and the playing with math with what it was like to work with Stephen as a person, since, I mean, he's not only like a mythical figure in the zeitgeist, but he's somebody who, I mean, I could tell from reading that he was incredibly important to you as a mentor and a collaborator. And the main thing that I'm curious about, just from my own work with professors, is whether he would whether he was the sort of advisor who would give you a problem and send you off on your own to work on it, or whether it was really very collaborative. And I think this must be all the more complex because of his physical limitations and then the obligations that came from whisking around on jets all the time from his fame.
Right. All right, that's a good question. He was neither type of mentor that you describe. He was not the kind of mentor that would just send you off. That's certainly not how I've known him, certainly not in that stage of his career, in which he worked, in fact, quite closely with his students. He gave us problems, or he put us in certain directions which were close to his heart. Then, on the other hand, of course, he was also not the kind of mentor that would participate in the calculations and follow up closely. So, because of course he was, as you say, too busy, it was difficult anyway to write down an equation for him. So that was also not the way it was working. So somehow I think he had a sort of a unique blend. His mentorship was close in certain ways, close, for instance, in the conceptual sides of problems, and hands-off when it came to actual calculations. So I think it was sort of a mix, at least in that time, in that sort of span of his career that I've known him as a mentor in the late 90s. Of course, by then, it may have been different in the 80s. And it was certainly impossible later in the early 2000s, when communication with Stephen became much more difficult. But in the 90s, it was an exciting time in cosmology. There were lots of new observations. It was an exciting time in theoretical physics because ADS-CFT and holography was being discovered. Inflation was being tested. So, and Stephen's book, A Brief History of Time, was out. So he was back into research, and he was back into research in a way which involved very much his students. That's at least how I have experienced it. Of course, this whole collaboration that I describe in my book, it spans a period of more than 20 years. So our relation very much evolved during those years. That's obvious, right?